Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
The Central West Renewable Energy Zone was declared in 2021 in an effort for the New South Wales Government to try to power the homes of the state into the future and turn away from reliance on burning fossil fuels. The New South Wales Government is proposing to amend the declaration of the Central West Orana Renewable Energy Zone to increase the network capacity of the REZ to support the state's future energy needs. That means more projects within the current zone, not an expansion of the area of the zone. To talk a little bit more to this, we welcome the Mayor of Dubbo, Matthew Dickerson. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jac. Thanks for talking to me.
Thanks for coming on. How do you feel about this?
Well, the Renewable Energy Zone in our area, and this Renewable Energy Zone, the Central West Orana Renewable Energy Zone, a long enough title there, covers part of the Dubbo Regional Council area, also part of Mid-Western, so Mudgee, and part of the Warrumbungle Shire, which is Coonabarabran area. From our perspective, and it's more towards the Wellington end of our local government area, from our perspective, this is a once in a generation, maybe a once in a multi-generation opportunity, Jac, to inject some badly needed funds into our economy, into our region. So this is an incredibly exciting opportunity. The fact that it's going to go from 3 gigawatts, which was the original size they said this renewable energy zone would be back in November 2021 when they first announced this or had this part approved, to then go to 2 stages, 4.5 gigawatts under stage 1 and then under stage 2 up to 6 gigawatts. And they're saying by 2038, although I think it'll be probably earlier than that. That means more money, more investment, more possibilities to bolster the economy in this region and in particular around the Wellington area.
And how do those communities feel about that? What feedback are you hearing?
The feedback really is very positive, and there are some pockets that aren't overly positive, but in general, most of these projects we're seeing are probably going to be more wind than solar. And wind seems to be somewhat better accepted. I'm not saying universally, but somewhat better accepted because with wind, you still have a farmer able to continue on farming their land. A lot of these farmers are sheep, sometimes cattle, because you've got these on hills which aren't great for cropping because obviously the wind on a hill, there's going to be more wind generated as it moves over those hills. So from a farmer's perspective, it's fantastic. They've got guaranteed income for each turbine, for each tower that's on their property, and it could be anywhere from say $10,000 to $20,000 per turbine per year. Now the great part about that is that's guaranteed off-farm income, and I know some of the farmers that I've spoken to that have already got wind turbines on their farms around Badenga near Wellington. Some of them said through the drought, the last major drought we had, it was what kept them going. It allowed them to keep feeding their stock. They didn't have to sell off their stock, so it's a really positive thing from that perspective. And again, you don't lose much land when you have a tower there because you've just got the small pad the tower sits on. You get some of your roads upgraded, maybe some fences and gates upgraded, and that off-farm income. So that's all very positive. Solar obviously is a bit different. The main issue with solar seems to be that you're losing prime agricultural land, and certainly in some areas you've got large flat parcels of land that have typically been used for cropping, wheat crops for example, and it's pretty hard to grow a wheat crop between solar panels that are sitting there in rows. If you've got sheep farming though, there's work being done now by some of these proponents to actually investigate whether or not they can continue on their sheep farming and what happens with it. And some of the early reports coming through say that you'd probably drop your capacity of the number of sheep you could run between the solar panels to about 70% of the normal capacity. But the actual wool quality seems to be a little bit higher, so you may not lose that much of it if you were a sheep farmer. Again, that doesn't solve the problem for cropping, but in general, most people see this as an opportunity to completely transform Wellington.
Another thing that I hear about is that renewable projects don't really create ongoing jobs within communities. There's an initial setup, but the maintenance requires very few people. Do you hear that argument?
Certainly there is one of the things that once you get the solar farm, once you get a wind farm set up, it doesn't require hundreds of people to run that. If it was a coal mine, then you've got lots of people that are involved in that coal mine on an ongoing basis, and Mudgee is a good example of that. About a third of the direct income that goes into the Mudgee economy comes directly from the coal mines, the 3 coal mines that are around the Mudgee area there. One of the things that's interesting is that yes, that is one thing, but during the construction phase, there'll be a huge peak, if you like, of people that need to live in the area. The media release put out by the New South Wales government said around 5,000 people for this project over the next 15 years. We've done our own modelling just to see what Dubbo would need. We think there's probably 6,000 employees needed in the Dubbo local government area alone for this. And again, it might be for the next 10 to 15 years. But I suppose when you look at a coal mine or a coal-fired power plant or any major project, nothing is forever. Now, we know there's a deadline on these in terms of the projects will be built and then all those people won't be needed. But what we're seeing happen at the moment is there will be a project after a project after a project. As one project finishes, those employees will be needed on another project. So we talk about the year 2038 for that 6 gigawatts for stage 2. Well, that's 15 years of construction that we'll see there. But again, I think it'll continue on past that. I think there'll be this ongoing construction phase. But then, Jackie, I've got a plan. I've got a secret plan, which I'll tell you about as long as you don't tell anyone else about it, if that's okay. I've got this plan to have a project where we build a REAC. A REAC, it's got to be an acronym, you know it's serious then, which stands for Renewables Education and Activity Centre. And I looked at the examples with the Parks Dish and I looked at the examples with the Snowy Mountains Hydro Scheme. And in both those projects and many other projects around the nation, the project was important for one part they needed to build it for, but they built a visitor centre as a part of that. And if we can build, and again, I've been talking to federal government, state government, various proponents, talking to anyone that'll listen to me, or even talk to you about it, Jack, if you'll listen to me. And effectively, what we want to do is build this activity centre, this education centre, a visitor centre. And when I look at some of those other examples, you've got 100,000 people a year visit the Dish. You've got about 150,000 a year visit the Snowy Hydro Scheme. 150 schools go through the Snowy Hydro Scheme each year. So imagine if we have some type of visitor centre with some education around there and maybe some activities there as well where people can come and visit that. 100,000 visitors a year would transform Wellington overnight. We only get 300,000 visitors a year to the zoo, and that is an incredibly important aspect of Dubbo's economy. So 100,000 to Wellington would be fantastic. The coup de grace on that, Jack, is just a small wind tower, maybe just a 10-metre one that you could go up and use as a viewing platform and then abseil down it at the end of it. I just think that would be fantastic. Don't know about the risk assessment on that one, but if we can just convince someone to get into that REAC and build it, then I think that would be the transformational piece to end all the construction work.
There really is some blue sky thinking there. Thank you for sharing. So really, what I'm hearing here is there's not much conflict coming out of the Orana energy zone. It sounds like from the consultation that you've done, it's mostly positive. It's
mostly positive. And don't get me wrong, I met with New South Wales farmers in Dunedoo one day, and certainly there were some people concerned about it. And it's not just for a res, it's not just the actual power programs that you're building. So it's not just the wind farms, the batteries and the solar panels. That's in everywhere. So the projects that we've already got, we've got a 113 megawatt wind farm in Badengra. We've got a 200 megawatt solar farm, a 400 megawatt solar farm under construction. Technically, none of those are part of the res. The res applies, and again, I'm being very pedantic here, but it applies specifically to projects that plug into the new transmission lines that are being built. There's a 500 kilovolt transmission line and a 330 kilovolt transmission line being built by EnergyCo to allow all this transmission of power to go back to where it's needed along the coast. So those projects also create some other conflicts with farmers because they're going to put transmission lines through their land. Some of the farmers are quite okay with that because they get paid an upfront payment and then they get paid an annual payment for the life of those transmission lines. So that's not too bad. But again, there are some people. So there is conflict. I don't want to paint over it and ignore it completely. There is some conflict. There are some people that are unhappy. But in general, most of the comments that I hear are very positive. And the fact that we've got some projects already that are up and running, people are very positive about what it can do to our community.
Indeed. Thursday there is a parliamentary inquiry looking at undergrounding those transmission lines, and reports coming out from farmers whose properties have been valued less than what they were worth and nowhere near the compensation that they would be offered. Just in regards to solar projects, obviously there's a lifespan of that. Any idea on what we do with the waste?
Well, again, one of the things that's interesting with solar, and for most people that have got solar roof panels, they will notice over the life of their solar panels, they don't work and then suddenly stop working. Typically what they do is they slowly deteriorate. So what you might have been able to produce when they were brand new, 20 years later, they might only produce 80% of that. So there's some work being done from a circular economy perspective where you might take those solar panels and use them in other projects where you've got more surface area to use those, and you might upgrade the solar panels on some of the projects. But you can actually break them down. If you got to the stage where that solar panel was down to, say, 50% of its original production, 40%, you really think it's not worth it, the solar panels, as they stand at the moment with our current technology, there's around about 97% of that can be recycled and built into, say, a new solar panel.
Right.
So,
and do you foresee that as something that Dubbo Council would be responsible for, recycling and taking care of that waste?
well, hopefully not. Hopefully there are other organisations, and already some have come and talked to Dubbo about being somewhere in Dubbo, having an office set up, that type of thing. I think there'll be business models that will set up. They'll create some work where they'll go out and they'll take off your old solar panels, for example, and then they'll recondition them, or they'll look at them and check them, and then they'll get them onto other people and charge a fee for that. So I think other businesses, I see that councils get involved in too many businesses now. We need to make sure we stick to our core and don't try and be everything to everyone. But businesses will take up some of those opportunities, I believe.
Yeah. All right, we are out of time. Thank you as always for joining us. Great to chat, and enjoy the rest of your week, won't you?
Thank you, Jac.
Thanks. Mayor of Dubbo there, Matthew Dickerson, having a chat about the possible expansion of capacity of the Renewable Energy Zone for the Central West Orana region.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.